When Joe Cinque met Anu Singh in 1995, it wasn't long before he was smitten with her. However, he had no idea of the impact this relationship would have on him. Anu dominated his time with complaints of ongoing illnesses that doctors could not find any reasons for. While Joe's mum urged him to be careful he wasn't being manipulated, he was helpless to resist being there in a caretaker role for the person he loved. This would ultimately be his undoing. Hello my friends, how is everyone today? I hope you are all well. Before we get into the case, I just want to run through the usual disclaimer. We discuss true crime cases involving domestic abuse and domestic homicide on this channel. If this isn't the kind of content you were looking for, thanks for stopping by. Please know that everything I present here is just information that I found online and my own opinions. So please always do your own research and draw your own conclusions. If you find this content valuable, I do hope you consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons because it helps to push these videos out to more people. And by doing so, together we can spread awareness of the warning signs of domestic abuse that people may otherwise overlook. That is ultimately why I cover these cases. So with all that being said, let's get into it. People are mowing everywhere today. I do apologise if you can hear it. I would just wish they'd do my lawn if they're going to do it. Today's case is infuriating for many reasons, so there is your warning. Prepare for your blood to boil over this one. I also want to let you know that there is a non-fiction book about this case called Joe Cinque's Consolation, which was also made into a film in 2004, and it is on YouTube if you're interested in watching it. I'll link it below. Okay, let's begin by talking about a young lady, Anu Singh. Anu was born in Punjab, India on the 3rd of September 1972 to Indian-Australian parents, Paddy and Surinder Singh, both doctors. The family emigrated from India to Sydney in 1973 when Anu was a baby. They originally settled in Strathfield. However, by the time Anu was in high school, the family were living in Newcastle. Anu attended a Catholic high school and graduated in 1990. Anu's father describes his daughter as happy-go-lucky when she was young, although does say she exhibited signs of attachment issues. He also says in her 20s her mental health declined, and this was only exacerbated by the breakup with her boyfriend, Simon Walsh. Anu had moved to Canberra to study at the Australian National University, undertaking a double major of economics and law. However, in Canberra, she'd begun to use recreational drugs, and these further affected her mental state, and she deferred her studies to return home for a year. This is when, in 1995, she met Joe Cinque at the Brewery, a pub in Newcastle, and they had an affair. I say affair because Anu was still involved with Simon Walsh at the time. The breakup that apparently had affected her so badly was because he had found out about her infidelity with Joe. Joe was born on the 11th of June 1971 to parents Maria and Nino Cinque. The family, along with Joe's little brother Anthony, lived in Newcastle. The Cinque home was a happy one, filled with the noise and exuberance you'd expect, housing two growing boys. Throughout his school life, Joe spent his days engaged in any and all sports. He was also a good student who was popular among his classmates. Joe initially planned on going into architecture, but decided against it, studying civil engineering instead. He completed his studies in 1994 and took off for Europe for 2 months before coming home to find work as a project manager with the same civil engineering company where his father and grandfather worked. However, this was not a position of nepotism. Joe was known as a dependable and hard-working employee. Through 1995, Joe and Anu continued seeing each other casually, and when Anu went back to uni in Canberra in 1996, the couple began a long-distance relationship, with Joe travelling down to see Anu every weekend. This was a 450-kilometre journey, 5.5 hours each way. He would leave on Friday afternoon and return in the early hours of Monday morning to make it to work by 9 a.m. It was obvious that Joe was very taken with Anu, but his family were concerned. They were seeing changes in him. Maria and Nino tried to talk to Joe about their concerns, but he explained that Anu needed him. Anu had ongoing health problems, and if she was ill, Joe would drop everything to go and be with her, even if that meant leaving work in the middle of the week. Anu had been complaining of stomach issues, although doctors and specialists were unable to find any cause. At this time, she was still using drugs, though, and experimenting with amphetamines, and at times would spiral into paranoia. She was also obsessed with her physical appearance and had developed bulimia. She was trying any and all fad diets, spending hours in the gym and experimenting with various purging techniques, including the use of Ipecac, a vomit-inducing drug. Anu says that Joe was the person who told her about Ipecac. He had mentioned it, saying that he'd heard of supermodels using it to control their weight. This had been an offhanded remark, but Joe must have realised that this topic was not helpful to his body image obsessed girlfriend and refused to talk about it with Anu when she brought it up afterwards. However, it would turn out that she had in fact taken Ipecac briefly and was subsequently angry with Joe for introducing her to it. Over time, she began blaming this use of Ipecac for her health issues. Joe's parents could see what he was too close to recognise, and that was Anu's manipulation of their son. In one conversation, Maria told Joe not to let Anu control him, but his response made it hard for her to keep trying to warn him in hopes he would see what was happening. Joe replied, "Don't make me choose. I love you, but she needs me." I can only imagine Maria's fear of losing her son if she continued to push. In September of 1996, Joe moved to Canberra to be with Anu. The couple moved into a townhouse and combined their finances. They discussed their future together, including marriage. When uni ended for the year in November, the couple spent 3 weeks in Newcastle, staying with Joe's parents. Maria couldn't fault Anu's behaviour on this visit, but still didn't believe that she was the right person for her son. And we can all say that that's just a mother's love, but there's also that women's intuition. Sometimes you just have that gut feeling. When returning to uni in 1997, her health complaints had increased. She complained of aching legs and chronic fatigue. She told her friends there was something wrong with her metabolism and her muscles were being eaten away, but the doctors couldn't find what was wrong with her, and they diagnosed her issues as purely psychological. Remember, both of her parents are physicians. Surely if they were concerned, they would be all over trying to work out what was happening to their child. And Joe did what he could to support and take care of her. In this time, Anu frequently missed lectures and was not engaging in social activities as much either. Her classmates noticed when they did see her, she was uncharacteristically unkempt. This was in contrast to her earlier, generally immaculate and prideful dress sense. Anu had a very high opinion of herself and was someone who looked down on anyone she deemed intellectually inferior. In her early years of study, she believed that she didn't need to be at all her lectures. But now it was becoming obvious she was falling behind her peers. Her mental health issues continued to worsen. However, Anu was insistent that the issues she was facing were solely physical. Her mother came across her pacing in her room one day, insisting there were bugs crawling under her skin and that it felt like her head was on someone else's body. Her mother eventually convinced her to see a psychiatrist. This psychiatrist referred her to a colleague, but Anu never followed through with the second appointment. In 1997, according to episode 130 of the podcast Case File, which covers this case, Anu became convinced that she had contracted AIDS and told a friend it was unfair that Joe was unaffected by her disease. She said she planned to put a drop of her infected blood on his toothbrush. When her AIDS test came back negative, she considered that she had a crippling nervous system condition like multiple sclerosis or peripheral neuropathy. She began showering up to 7 times a day and told her father that she believed she was going to die. Her mother, to her credit, contacted a mental health crisis team and attempted to have Anu admitted for treatment. But because she wasn't considered a danger to herself or others, they couldn't admit her without her consent. In May of 1997, Anu told her friend that she hated Joe and she wanted to go on a rampage and kill him, her ex-boyfriend Simon, along with all the incompetent doctors who she believed had failed her. She went on to say, quote, "I've studied psychiatric tests and it wouldn't be too hard to convince someone that you're insane," end quote. Anu had a very close friend named Madhavi Rayo, and it was with Madhavi that Anu had shared the most insight into her plans. Anu spoke to a number of friends and acquaintances about her desire to take her own life. However, no one seemed to take her seriously. She asked a friend on campus if he could help her get a gun because she was suffering from permanent neurological damage and wanted to end her life. This was not the only person she'd approached at uni to ask for help obtaining a firearm. Both these guys thought she was joking. When she told a third person of her plan to end her life with a gun, this helpful individual said that an intentional heroin overdose would be a much better way to die. What? Now, not only are these people not seeking to help her, but they're now offering tips. Anu began selling off her clothes and giving away her CDs. This is a big red flag when it comes to suicide, the distributing of personal objects. Her parents, recognizing this as a problem, began reaching out to the mental health crisis team, this time submitting an application to have Anu hospitalized despite her lack of consent. This was not a swift process, which is ridiculous. A mental health crisis is generally not something that can be tended to when it suits, but it had to go before the courts and be evaluated, which, yes, is good, but needs to be done in a timely manner. We don't want anyone just being able to, with a letter to the crisis team, be locking people away, but at the same time, it needs to happen a little more swiftly. Sorry, bug. In August, Anu obtained information about what would be a lethal dose of heroin after questioning a known drug dealer on campus. A week later, she paid $250 for a half gram of heroin. This dealer also very helpfully showed her and Madhavi how to prepare a syringe of the drug, then proceeded to inject both of them for the first time. Wow, I've really got nothing to say to that beyond wow. A few weeks later, Anu went back to the dealer. Yes, the helpful dealer who had suggested OD as the preferable method of death and who had shown her how to inject the drug to achieve this. She popped back in to purchase a gram of heroin. The dealer asked why she needed so much, and Anu replied, "Someone is coming with me." Joe went to see his parents in Newcastle on the 19th of October, and he explained that he and Anu were hosting a dinner party the following evening and asked his mother if she had any meals prepared that he could take home for the event. Maria offered to make something for him, but he told her it was okay. He'd just pick something up. The dinner party went ahead as planned on the 20th. Anu had invited Madhavi, who knew exactly what Anu's plan was. Madhavi had invited a friend named Olivia, who didn't know Joe or Anu. Before they arrived, Madhavi had explained to Olivia that this dinner party was a send-off, that Anu had prepared it as a farewell before she took her and Joe's lives. When they got there, Anu explained that she had cooked more food than the 4 of them could eat. So she sent her guests out door knocking, rounding up the other uni students in the neighbourhood to come around for the dinner party. Odd, but not as odd or disturbing as the fact that many of the people they invited had already heard of Anu's plan for the evening and came, not really knowing the couple, just out of morbid curiosity. Not one of these people who turned up at his house even thought to let Joe in on the real reason for this gathering, which is just absolutely insane. Even if you don't know these people, even if they're both in on this suicide pact and equally want to end their lives, why is no one stepping up and trying to stop this or reach out for help to alert authorities? I just don't understand how this can happen. It's baffling. By all accounts, the couple were very loving and happy throughout the dinner, and when the evening passed and morning came without incident, the morbid and curious guests figured it was just a bid for attention by Anu. What they didn't know was that Anu had crushed sedatives and put them into Joe's drink, and once he was asleep, she retrieved a prepared syringe of heroin. However, even though Joe was dozy, he wasn't completely still, and Anu struggled to find a vein. After a time, the liquid congealed and was unable to be used. Joe had escaped Anu's plan for him. Anu announced a second dinner party for the 24th of October. By this point, people were just rolling their eyes at Anu's continued claim that she was going to kill herself, believing her to be attention-seeking. The second dinner party went much the same way as the first, again with Joe being none the wiser when it came to the underlying reason for Anu's sudden desire to entertain and feed the neighbourhood. He actually came home from work to a house full of people, and although this was a surprise, Joe rolled with it, chatting to guests about his new car and a holiday he was planning to take to Queensland. The dinner party went much like the previous one had. However, the aftermath was much, much different. After all the guests had gone home, apart from Madhavi, who didn't leave until 6 a.m. the following morning, Anu crushed up, by Madhavi's account, 10 Rehypnol tablets, which is just scary in itself. If you don't know, Rehypnol, roofies, date rape drug. They just make a person incapacitated. She crushed these 10 Rehypnol tablets and slipped them into Joe's coffee. Then over the next 36 hours, she injected him several times with heroin. She even at one stage left to buy more heroin and returned to shoot up her unconscious boyfriend again. 36 hours. In this time, she made several phone calls to friends about what she was doing. One of her calls was partially recorded on her friend's answering machine. Joe had woken up from the Rehypnol and took the phone and was groggy, but told the person on the other end of the phone he was fine. On her trip out to get more heroin, she stopped in to see the friend that she'd called earlier and told him that when Joe had woken up, he had told her that he was going to leave her. Madhavi, who was also there, told this friend that Anu had tried to kill Joe the night before with heroin. On these numerous phone calls, Anu told her friends that Joe was vomiting blood, taking one breath every 10 seconds, and that his lips had turned blue. When she did finally call emergency services at 12:10 p.m, she kept talking over the operator and not giving them the address. When she gave the address, it was initially incorrect, then incomplete, and she was evasive, despite the dispatcher repeatedly asking her to calm down and for the address. The ambulance depot was a mere kilometre from Joe and Anu's home. It took 8 minutes for the ambulance to arrive due to the delay in getting the information needed from Anu. I mean, after 36 hours, 8 minutes, probably not gonna make that much impact, but still, she's still hampering this poor man getting assistance, even when she's calling for it. When the paramedics finally arrived at the scene, Anu threw herself across Joe's body sobbing. "You have to bring him back. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. We were supposed to go together." Paramedics found there was nothing they could do. Joe couldn't be revived. Police were called to the scene and physically removed Anu from where she was rocking back and forth, cradling Joe's body. They took her aside to question her. She reported to police that she had given Joe Rehypnol and she'd also taken some herself. She went on to tell them she had then injected herself and Joe with heroin, saying, "I just kept pumping it into him to put him to sleep so he wouldn't be awake when I killed myself." The police wasted no time in placing her under arrest for murder. Joe's family was notified of his death that evening, and when they were informed that a woman had been charged with his murder, they knew that it had to be Anu. The autopsy and toxicology reports showed that Joe had died of asphyxiation while under the influence of heroin and Rehypnol. The typical concentration of heroin found in the body of an overdose victim is between 0.2 and 0.5 mils per litre. The concentration in Joe's system was 0.67 mils per litre. The police found a note in Joe's planner for an appointment on Monday the 27th, 3 days after that last dinner party. The note said, "Get ready to move," with an arrow pointing to 6 p.m. and another notation, "Move urgent, today." When Joe's parents went to his home to collect his belongings, they were unable to find his luggage, leading them to believe he was already in the process of moving out and that he'd decided to leave Anu. Through the police investigation, they executed a search warrant on Anu's friend Madhavi's home, and there they found syringes, Rehypnol, and other drug paraphernalia, along with Anu's diary, which was torn up in Madhavi's garbage. Madhavi was then placed under arrest and charged with Joe's murder also. Madhavi's parents posted her $100,000 bond and she was released to their custody. Anu was held awaiting trial and a psychiatrist presented evidence of a personality disorder. The prosecution pinpointed Anu as someone who embodied strong narcissistic traits. Anu and Madhavi's joint trial had been scheduled for 1998, but this trial was aborted on the 11th of November, with Justice Ken Crispin saying that one of the pieces of evidence was problematic, as it was unclear as to which of Anu or Madhavi it was admissible against. For the second trial, Anu elected to stand trial by judge alone, forgoing a jury. Justice Crispin ruled that Anu and Madhavi should be tried separately in the interest of fairness. Anu was back on trial in 1999. Her defence team presented evidence that she was mentally ill and had diminished responsibility, proposing an insanity defence. The court was told that Anu believed she was dying from a muscle-wasting disease, that she complained of not being able to feel her head on her body, and she was bulimic. The prosecutors called an expert witness to testify that Anu had appeared rational and assertive on the night she was arrested. On the 23rd of April, Justice Crispin found Anu Singh guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter, and the following day he sentenced her to 10 years imprisonment, with a minimum 4-year non-parole period. I can only imagine what a slap in the face that sentence must have felt like to Joe's family. And as author Helen Garner noted in her reporting of the trial, Anu's story constantly hogged centre stage at the expense of Joe's own story. Nino and Maria Cinque's grief was never even given form in that court. Madhavi faced trial and was acquitted of all charges. And I can't wrap my head around that one. At one point in this diabolical plan, Madhavi had given Anu money to buy the heroin. How in the world is she not guilty of conspiracy to commit murder? But anyway, she was free to go, and in October of 2001, Anu was released on parole after 4 years. These 4 years included the 2 years that she was incarcerated while awaiting her trial. In her time behind bars, she completed a master's in criminology, having attended classes on day release from Emu Plains Correctional Centre. Since she's been out of prison, she has used her law degree and master's in criminology, and in 2012 was awarded a doctorate for her thesis, Offending Women, toward a greater understanding of women's pathways into and out of crime in Australia. Apparently, it outlines 5 major pathways that led female prisoners to crime. I'm sorry, I'm being snarky. Things like unstable upbringings, sexual and physical abuse, drug use, economic marginality, and mental illness. An edited version was released as a self-published ebook in 2016. Well, bully for her. She just gets to go on with her life while Joe's family is left to carry on with a gaping hole where their beloved son and brother used to be. This is just a senseless, tragic, and infuriating case, and my heart goes out to the Cinques. It's just ridiculous. I said the same thing in Bianca Devon's case. What does a person need to do to be charged with first-degree murder? She plotted and planned this. She attempted it once before. It didn't pan out, so she doubled down and did it again 4 days later. What on earth? She went around, she told everyone. Why? Why is it manslaughter? It's disgraceful. It is absolutely disgraceful. And I'm sorry for my outburst. Take a breath If the content of this case has raised any concerns for you regarding your own relationship or that of a loved one, please reach out for help. As always, there is a list of resources in the description box below. Please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe if you are finding this content valuable. And until next time, please take care of yourselves and be kind to one another.